bug examples, simple English, step by step. Part 1, what is NoSQL? First, what is SQL? Traditional databases, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, they use SQL queries like, you can see the code in our conversation history. What is NoSQL? NoSQL databases store data differently, JSON style, very common in modern apps. Popular NoSQL database, MongoDB. Example data in MongoDB, you can see the code in our conversation history. Knocker Part 2, what is NoSQL injection? NoSQL injection happens when, open quote, user input is inserted into database query without proper validation, and attacker manipulates query logic, close quote. It is similar to SQL injection, but syntax is different. Part 3, basic vulnerable login example. Imagine backend code like this. You can see the code in our conversation history. Normal login, you can see the code in our conversation history. Query becomes, you can see the code in our conversation history. Works normally. Now, the attack in MongoDB special operators exist like meets an E not equal, GT greater than, exists. Attacker sends, you can see the code in our conversation history. Query becomes, you can see the code in our conversation history. Meaning, open quote, find admin where password is not null. Close quote, since password is not null, login bypass and hash. Why this works, because backend trusted user input directly. It did not sanitize or validate data types. Real world bug examples. Example 1, login bypass in MongoDB app. Researchers found login API like, you can see the code in our conversation history. They modified request, you can see the code in our conversation history. Result, logged in as admin without knowing password. Impact, account takeover, full admin access. This type of bug has appeared in multiple startup apps using MongoDB. Example 2, authentication bypass via GT vulnerable query. You can see the code in our conversation history. Attacker sends, you can see the code in our conversation history. Meaning, open quote, username greater than empty string, password greater than empty string, close quote. Almost all users match this condition. Result, logged in as first user in database. And example 3, data extraction via blind NoSQL injection. Some apps allow search. You can see the code in our conversation history. Backend, you can see the code in our conversation history. Attacker sends, you can see the code in our conversation history, which becomes, you can see the code in our conversation history, meaning return all users. Data leakage occurs. Why NoSQL injection is common today? Because many modern apps use MongoDB. Developers think JSON equals safe. Input validation is weak. ORMs automatically convert objects. Difference. SQL or a SQL injection, NoSQL injection, uses SQL syntax, uses JSON operators. OR1 equal 1, any, GT, exists, string-based, object-based. Hash where NoSQL injection usually happens. Login forms, search APIs, filters, JSON-based APIs, mobile backend APIs. How developers should fix validate input type, string only, reject JSON objects in input, use strict schema validation, sanitize input, use parameterized queries. Example secure validation. You can see the code in our conversation history. Has severity level, if login bypass critical, if data leak high, if partial bypass medium. Final clear understanding NoSQL injection equals when attacker manipulates JSON-based database query using operators like any, GT, exists to bypass authentication or extract data. If you want next, blind NoSQL injection deep explanation, real bug bounty report example, practice lab style explanation, compare SQLi versus NoSQL exploitation mindset. Tell me what level you want.